Alright, in this video let's talk about DOM manipulation. So what is DOM manipulation? Well, the DOM is the document object model. In other words, it's the HTML part of what we do in web development. Often you load static HTML, it's been predefined, you just load it and then everything is fine. But what if the HTML can't be static? What if I want to create the HTML at runtime? So I get a list of data that comes through and I want to represent that data in the HTML, but I need to loop through the data, create the items, and add them to the screen to actually display. Well, I need to do that via JavaScript. So there's some basic things that I want to be able to do. One, be able to get elements. Two, create elements, add them to the DOM, and then also be able to remove elements. So let's say I have a unordered list, and this is going to be the target element that I'm going to add my items to. So the very first thing that we need to understand about DOM manipulation is I want to be able to get an element so I can work with it. So in this case, I'm going to create a variable called UL, and I'm going to set that equal to document.querySelector. And the query that I'm going to use is UL. Because I only have one UL on the page, that's fine. So step number one, how do I get a hold of a element? Well, I use document.querySelector. You can use element by ID and element by tag name and all that kind of stuff like that, but if you only remember one function, it's document.querySelector, you're pretty much good. The only exception to this rule is that if you use this inside of a web component, then you don't use the word document, you'd rather use the word this, because you say find the items in this element down. You don't want to search the whole document for that. Alright, so document.querySelector, and now I have the UL to work with. So let's say that I want to go and create an element. So let's say li equals document.createElement. So create element takes in a parameter, and the parameter that it takes in is the tag name that we want to add. So there are optional parameters that you can add as well. 99.999% of the time you don't need that, you just need the tag name. So how do I get an element? Document.querySelector. How do I create an element? Document.createElement. Now, if I'm writing a custom web component, I'll still use document.createElement. Okay, so note that. Regardless of where I'm creating an element, it's always document.createElement. Now that I have created the element, I need to go and attach that element to UL. So UL is the parent. So what I want to try and do is put it over there, right? So I don't have any content in this li yet, so I'm just going to say li.textContent is equal to item, and then I can say ul.append child. So append this child to this parent, and the child I want to append is li. Get a hold of the ul element, create the li element, attach the li element as a child to the ul element. So when I refresh this, there's my item there. So if there's my ul, there's my li item. So that's fairly simple. But what if I've got 100 items and I want to create an li for the 100 items? Well, you need to take special note of this one, because I'm not just going to add it to the UL directly. For performance reasons, we are going to use a intermediate object called a document fragment. So first thing we need to do is create a document fragment. So we'll call it fragment equals document.create document fragment. So this is how I create a document fragment. Now that I have the document fragment, I am going to quickly go and create all of my li objects. So for this example, I'm just going to say let I equal 0, I is less than 100, I plus plus, and then I'm going to say const li equals document.createElement, because that's how we create the element, and I want an li, and I'm going to say li.textContent is equal to item I. So I'll have item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, etc. And once I've now created it, I need to attach this to something. So I'll say fragment.append child and then li. So the good news is that whenever I want to append an element to anything else, it's always append child. Whether it's a document fragment or an element or the document body, it's always append child. So now that I've appended to the fragment, nothing is actually going to happen until I append the fragment to the UL. Right, so now that I've done that, and I go to this here and I do a refresh, there's my 100 items. So if I create a single item, I can add it directly to the element. If I create multiple items, then I want to rather create the document fragment, append those multiple items to the fragment, and append the fragment to the parent element. Alright, so now we've spoken about creating, or first of all, getting access to an element to work with it later on. So we use the query selector for that. Creating an element, so we use the create element for that, and appending it to the DOM. Just because you created it doesn't mean it's in the DOM. You need to tell it where to go into the DOM. In this case, we're appending it to the UL. Let's just take some of this complexity away. So I'm just going to take this stuff out, and we're just going to call this item 1 again. And we need to append this li. So just to make sure that everything is actually up and running, let's just quickly go and test it. So there it is. So now I want to remove that item from the DOM. Alright, so let me quickly go to this item here, and I can right click on it here and say store as global. So now I have a variable that I can use quickly. So the quickest way to remove a particular element, you can say temp1 dot parent element dot remove child temp1, and now it's gone. Right? You'll notice that when I use remove child, the result of this function will give me back the element that I removed. So if I want to remove it from this parent in order to move it to another parent, right, I can just set the variable to remove child. So I'm just going to add it here as well. So there we have the li. So I can say here li dot parent element dot remove child li. So in this case, we're not going to see anything actually on the UI because we're going to append it and then we're going to remove it directly again. But just to make sure that everything's hunky-dory, there we go, 100%. So what did we learn and what should I remember? Okay, well the first thing you should remember is how do I get a hold of an element to work with it, and the way that I do it is either through document or this, and I use the function on either document or this called query selector, and the query selector takes a string parameter which is a CSS selector. So you can go and Google CSS selectors and see what the variations of that is, and you can do quite a lot of stuff. Get me the element by this ID or by this class or that has this attribute. Just remember that when I want to search the entire DOM for it, I use document, but if I'm working on a component and I only want to find a subset of an element, I can use this. Just so by the way, you can also get a hold of a parent element like in the UL. So let's quickly do that. So const UL equals document.query selector UL, and now I have the element, right? So I can say UL.query selector as well, and now I can say find me an LI that has an attribute called data-id where that value is equal to 1. And the reason why I want to be able to do stuff like that is sometimes I want to limit my search to a smaller part of the DOM. Whenever you can limit the search, it's faster. You don't want to search the entire document when I can only go through 3 or 4 elements and find what I want to instead of 4 or 3,000 items, right? Okay, so I want to be able to get hold of an element to work with it. Then I want to know how to create the element, and for that we use document.createElement, and we pass in the tag name that we want the element to be, and this will return a element for us. Right, so now I can go and do some other manipulation on this element. Then if I want to add the element to the DOM to a particular parent, I just use that parent element dot append child, and I pass in the element that I want to attach to it. And then if I want to remove an element, I can just use the remove child. So I'll say element dot remove child. Basic DOM manipulation. It's very important to get that under the knee as quickly as humanly possible.